Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I recently started a Q&A where people can ask me anything, and I try to talk through that challenge with them, help them in any way I can, and see how we can support. And I recently got this question from someone, and whoever asked this question, I think it's an awesome question. I think it's a challenge that a lot of support leaders face, and something that is definitely top of mind to think about, especially in these recent years. I think it's been a big shift for support teams, and something that has always constantly been on people's minds. The question that I got is, how can you keep your soul as a support professional and strive to create high quality customer experiences? Most exec teams are focused primarily on how to provide customer support as cheaply as possible. This question has a lot of nuances, and I want to break those down and talk about the different separate moving parts and pieces in a way that maybe gives some food for thought and some things to think about when you move forward into your next interactions. Firstly, I think it sounds like the exec team is talked about separately from yourself. And here, it's most exec teams there are just focused on primarily doing it as cheaply as possible. I would try and reframe, or at least from my perspective, exec teams from being just them and turn it into more of a we type of conversation. Because even though exec teams might be separated or disconnected, I think that's the first challenge to solve in this question. Everyone on the team should be working towards common organizational goals, whether you're a part of that exec team or not, or if that exec team is really focused on moving the business forward. And I think everybody's goal is to do that. So instead, I think really building a relationship with them, hands down by far, understanding their challenges, their problems. What are the biggest business organizational challenges that people are facing? I think this is by far one of the best things that you can do. Go to the exec team, find out the big 3 to 5 biggest challenges that they're facing right now, understand what are those priorities and problems, and build a relationship with them on a continuous basis, regardless of what's happening, so that you can actually get the support that you need and have those open conversations around what are those focuses and what are those priorities. I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to make sure that we are aligning and that bridge between the operational outcomes, the effectiveness of our teams, and the longer term strategies and goals that the business and organization has, so that we can translate those down into what the team's activities are and what we're doing as an organization. Try to build those relationships and really focus on consulting them, of understanding their problems and challenges and how your team can impact those. I think at a baseline, doing that will affect the rest of this question and the rest of the parts of this. The second part that I see here is as just being able to provide support as cheaply as possible. As cheaply as possible, 100%. This is one way to frame it. I think this goes into a much larger conversation around support being a cost center and versus a value driver, and being able to kind of have that conversation as well. At a baseline, I think that revenue responsibility and costs and operational costs are a responsibility of every single department across the organization. Effective use of revenue is a really, really important thing to keep in mind, that it's not just a support problem, it's an every department problem. Every organization is responsible for utilizing revenue effectively and efficiently, and support is just one of those departments within that frame. Within that, I would also reframe support being a cost center to thinking about each department as an investment center, because ultimately every single department has these costs, and it is something that the business will look at and say, okay, what's the return on that investment? And some departments, for example, sales, has a much higher return on that investment because it's bringing money and revenue back into the organization. So if you consider each department as an investment center instead of a cost center or not, what's the return on that investment? And there you can start to think about how your team impacts the effective use of that revenue. Is that investment really a value driver or not? And is it becoming something that is actually bringing much more value to the organization. Now, that value will be determined on what those business and exec teams' priorities and strategic issues or challenges that they're trying to solve are. So understanding those first, and then understanding, okay, with those priorities and problems, is an investment here really going to help to solve those challenges? And if you can start to keep this process ongoing and in mind, you can start to evaluate, okay, if we implement this feature or this process or this policy or continue to operate in this way, is it actually an effective use of that investment? So it's not necessarily as cheap as possible, but it is, are we maximizing the revenue that is going into it? And there, I think you can always ask the question, is it worth it to invest this or not? And there, if you have much better relationships with your exec team, with those individuals, then you can also start to build better business cases and have that relationship in place. In my experience, I've been able to luckily build really good relationships with the leadership team, with these teams. So when it does come to those conversations, it's a much easier conversation to have than if you don't have a good relationship and then you need to really go fight for every penny. So really try and focus on building those relationships, understanding their priorities and problems, and understanding if that investment will help them reach that problem. And if you can start to bridge that gap and have that conversation around, hey, this investment here was really going to help us move forward in such a way, then in that sense, you really do get the opportunity to have better conversations around where that investment is going. So that's at least the way that I like to reframe it and think about it. And sometimes it does ultimately come down to, can you do the job with what you got? And that brings me to the next part of this question, which I think is awesome, which is to create high quality customer experiences regardless of whatever else happens. In my opinion, I think that a great customer high quality interaction or experience is one that works, just at a baseline. If it works, if customers can get the support they need when they need it, if when those conversations come in or they do go to support, are those conversations being handled well and effectively, those I think already make a better experience. Now, I would ask the question, is a high quality customer experience based on what you think that is, or is that something that your customers expect? I would always ask, what is your customer's expectation of what a high quality experience looks like? Because for different industries and different companies and different organizations, it will differ based on what your customer needs are. And if you can effectively meet your customer where their needs are and go above that, that is what I would say is a high quality interaction. Is it easily accessible? Are those conversations being handled well? Is your knowledge up to date? I think having good internal knowledge practices and external knowledge practices always helps to facilitate that process. And another way to look at it as well is, is your team set up to have those successful conversations or be able to look at it? Ultimately, if you understand where your time is being spent within your teams, then you can also think about, hey, can we reduce a lot of that manual workload? Can we automate some things? One, that's better effective use of the revenue. Two, that is also a better use of your team's time, and it frees them up to have better conversations and be able to focus on moving that experience forward rather than just being stuck. Some things that I would think about and focus on, in my opinion, again, high quality customer experience is one that works, and you can continue to iterate and move on that as the business evolves and changes. And I think that goes into the last part of this question, which I think is a very, very important one, which is a motivational thing as well. So how do you keep your soul as a support professional while all these things are going on? Me, personally, I have had a very interesting time of solving very interesting problems. And I think the motivator for me, at least, I love creative problem solving and building and figuring out how things can work. And with limited resources is just an extra challenge within that. But it adds a little bit of a nuance of like, okay, how can I create this experience with as little as possible? It's made for some really scrappy and interesting solutions. At the same time, it is something that you can think really creatively about. I stay motivated by that. Being able to experiment, being able to think about, hey, how can I deliver that high quality experience with what I have? Well, let's go try and solve this quest, this challenge, and be able to move things forward. For me, that's always been a motivator. It depends on what motivates you. So I would definitely think about the things that you can do to keep yourself motivated. Alongside this, one of the things that I found that really helps me is celebrate, and celebrate often. Recognize your teams for the things that they're doing, regardless of what else is happening within the organization. If they're doing something well, recognize it, celebrate it. Be able to create these things in a culture of recognition within your teams. Having the people that surround you that can recognize when things are happening well definitely helps to stay motivated. And also, the community is here. I think the support community has grown, at least from my perspective, quite rapidly within the last couple of years. Really seeing a lot more people come together, share knowledge, being able to have those shared experiences, like the conversations that we're having right now, has also been a big motivator for me. So I think, finding that motivation, whether that's through solving interesting challenges, building interesting things, recognizing that, keeping good people around you, that's the way I love to do it. And I think that once you start building those relationships internally as well with your leadership team, then you'll also be able to stay motivated a lot more as well. I'm ranting now, but I hope this helps answer your question, share some thoughts on just overarching how this experience has been for me and how I try to think about it as well. So just to recap, a big summary: start really building the relationship with the exec team so that when you do have conversations around this, you understand what their priorities are, you understand how you fit into that piece of the puzzle and can utilize the investment effectively, and ultimately then be able to create that better experience with the things that you have. And I think that you'll find a lot more that motivation will keep up when you start to do that. So hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope this helps. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, I would love to hear them. Please let me know. And if you do have any other questions or anybody else has any questions, I still have the Q&A open. You can ask any question that you want at any time, and I'll put that in the comments below as well. So have a wonderful day, and hope this helps.